All right, everybody, welcome back to another Potato Crew Survival Realm tutorial. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to make a semi-automated tree farm. This does not have an automatic harvester and it does not consume bone meal. So it's really nice in early realms where you may have really limited resources, and it allows you to generate trees based on tick speed, but it's nice and close to town. It's an even platform, so you don't have to go up and down hills, and replanting is really easy. But let's jump right in and I'll start to show you the mechanics of this farm. You can really make these as big as you want. We started out with 9x10 but finished with 9x11 just because it looked a little bit better. We plan on growing oak, which is a pretty traditional tree. It has really easy growth mechanics, but you can grow any type of tree that you want in a farm like this. And the reason why oak is nice, at least on bedrock, is that you only need one space between each tree growing. So you'll see down there that there is a growth space, which is just a standard piece of dirt. And then all the other cut path we're going to replace with stone. Next, you're going to want to get underneath your farm, and you actually only need 2 spaces under the farm for all of the redstone mechanic that we're going to include. Now, again, if you don't want any redstone in this, you can skip this entire part. But for the different pistons and target blocks that we're going to end up using, all we really need is just a 2-space gap underneath the farm, pretty much the entire area. And the way that I do that is I like to dig under directly in the middle, and then I go to each corner. I dig down 3 spaces, and that allows me to basically run underneath the ground without having to pay attention to coordinates. I just have to run to my already cut block and use the holes in the ground that I made from above as kind of my start and stop points to when I need to turn. Once you have your corridors cut, then you just have to clear out everything in the middle. And once that middle is cleared out, then you're essentially done with the basement. You can choose to replace the block type if you want. Otherwise, just leave it as natural stone. But do remember to throw light sources down there so you don't have any type of mob spawning. Also, just as a little pro tip, don't forget to make yourself a trash can. My preference is to make a blue flame. Shout out to Legend of Zelda. And you can just throw away all of your nonsense block that you're going to accumulate through farming. All right, for this next part, Jeffisto and I are actually going to tag team this. He's going to be putting in all tile deep slate where we have cut path, and that'll make it a lot easier when it comes to planting trees. That way we don't plant them accidentally. And what I'm going to work on is the height limiter. And the reason why the height limiter is important is that when oak trees grow, there's a lot of different heights that they can grow that make it difficult for farming. But we're going to put our height limiter at 10 blocks above the ground. And I like to do that using scaffolding. It gives me a good gauge to determine the actual height of what 10 is. That way I don't have to count every single time. And all you have to do is take your solid block and match it to the height of your scaffolding. Next, I had to move this over by 1, but make sure that your height limiter is actually over the growth blocks where you're going to be planting your trees. So in this circumstance, because we're replacing all the cut path with stone and we have just individual dirt blocks for planting trees, just make sure that your height limiter is directly over where the trees are supposed to be growing. Then just replicate that at every row you plan on growing trees so that you have a height limiter for each row of tree. Then get back on top of the farm with several stacks of glass block and put the glass block between each row of your height limiter. Don't forget torches to prevent mob spawning. All right, so this next part is totally optional for this build. Once you have the floor replaced, you can stop there. But I want to show you a little bit of a redstone mechanic that I use, which makes this farm semi-automated. Shout out to my buddy TD Maxis. But what I use is a sticky piston on a target block. And what that allows us to do is whenever the target block receives a redstone signal, it sends the sticky piston upwards. And what that's going to allow us to have is a retractable floor when we go to harvest out our trees. Using redstone lamps, I'm going to show you guys kind of how the redstone connects with this type of a setup, because using target blocks, the redstone will actually connect to the target blocks directly. Whereas when you have solid blocks, you often have to include repeaters to get the redstone signal to direct appropriately into the solid block. And that becomes particularly cumbersome when you have several blocks that are going to be in succession from one another. And we have 99 that we need to hook up. So we certainly don't want to have 99 repeaters to make sure that we have the stone appropriately. Because you can see as you run the redstone horizontally, or at least next to each of those blocks, it won't actually connect to the redstone lamps. But if you do the same thing with target blocks, as you run the redstone next to the target blocks, it automatically connects to the target block and it sends the signal into the upper block. And here's a shot from above just so you can see the redstone a little bit easier. And then on this next view, I've included the repeaters, which then sends the redstone signal into that lower block, which again is really resource heavy and actually widely unnecessary now that we have target blocks. And now the tedious process of placing target blocks under every single dirt block where we have the intention of growing a tree. So now we want to start to throw redstone dust between every other row, but the entire length of the row. That way the redstone dust hits 2 target blocks at one time. But remember that redstone signals only go 15 blocks without a repeater. So you'll need to count out however large your farm is, that every 15 blocks you're going to have to add in a repeater. Now you need to connect all the rows together. All right, then to finish this out, we're just going to throw a lever on one of the corner blocks. And what that's going to do is activate a sticky piston. And that sticky piston is going to be attached to a redstone block. And when it actuates, it's going to send the redstone block down and turn on our redstone dust, which will actuate the pistons through the entire basement of this build. It does require a little bit of cleanup on the outside, but that's just cosmetic. So then whenever we throw this lever, we'll see that the soil goes up and down. Now all we have to do is throw sticky pistons on each of the target blocks, then throw dirt on each of the sticky pistons, test it out to make sure it works, and then just finish up the rest of the build. So fill in all the remaining slots. And you can start to plant trees. If you have bone meal, you can use it, but it's not necessary because there's 99 trees. They do tick out pretty quick, and then they are height limited, so it's going to be really easy to harvest those trees. As you can see here, we grab our hoe. If you have silk touch, you can get leaves out of this. Otherwise, you can get sticks and apples and saplings and that type of stuff. But you can just run down the row looking up, and you can get as many leaves as you need, and you're going to get pretty much right up to the ceiling with most of your leaves. But the big catch with this farm is that once you actuate the floor to pull the dirt blocks out, all of the trees start at eye level, so you don't actually have to farm down. And yes, when you actuate the floor, it does kick all your ungrown saplings off, but that's not a big deal. They're really easy to replant. So you can run around and knock all the stuff off that's eye level. But when you're ready to harvest the whole tree, you just have to look up, and then the tree is never going to grow further than what you can mine with an axe. So if you just look up and run down the whole row, you can take down the entire tree all in one go. Then when you're ready, just pop the floor back up and strafe while holding the place button, and you'll automatically just throw down a sapling on every piece of dirt that's been pushed upwards. So you're not going to misplace, you're just going to hit the dirt every single time. It's super simple for planting. And there you have it, another really simple build that is super convenient in early game. So thanks again for tuning in to the Potato Crew Survival Realm, and we'll catch you next time with another tutorial. See you then.